place mostly in the South during the 1930s. It focuses mostly on an unnamed black narrator who considers himself to be invisible. He's not actually invisible, just socially invisible. As a black man in racist America, he feels as though people simply don't see him. The story gets extremely dark at times and dives deep into race relations. However, it focuses mostly on the idea of individuality and how people define each other. In fact, the narrator's main epiphany is that, quote, I was looking for myself and asking everyone except myself questions which I, and only I, could answer. For most of the story, it almost considers what it's like to be a yes man to someone who you wholly disagree with. There are a lot of characters, but I want to highlight a few before I get into the plot. I'm, for obvious reasons, going to be flying through the story, so most characters won't get the time they deserve. These are just a few that I feel will help you get an idea of what this book is about. The narrator, as I explained, considers himself to be an invisible man. This revelation only comes later in his life, though. Like most stories we've read, this one takes place as a flashback. The structure goes like this: present in the beginning, then the past, and ends in the present again. The narrator, as a youth, was a gifted orator and tries to change how others believe. He becomes deeply involved with social activism, helping both the black and female communities. All his attempts, though, come out not due to those above him. They expect him to act like a token black person, and he mostly fills the part. The narrator then reflects on his youth, considering himself a fool. Jim Trueblood serves as the typical, stereotypical black person, except much, much worse. If anything, the author almost says that this is what white people see when they think of black people. Allow me to explain. He's your typical, uneducated black man who impregnates his own daughter. Yeah, it's disgusting and terrible, but that does happen in the story. Thankfully, the black community hates him for this, but the white community actually takes an interest in him. I kind of take this as an example of our modern news sources. We only ever hear about the things that grab our interest, and everything else gets ignored. Consider mass shootings. Yes, they are horrifying events, and that should never happen. But when compared with other shootings in America, they get way too much screen time and may even distract from the main issue behind the violence. Jim Trueblood serves that role. He grabs the white community's attention so that he is all they actually know about the black community. They don't know about the hundreds of black men attending universities and making their lives better. They know about the uneducated black man who impregnated his daughter. Dr. Bledsoe, in my opinion, serves as a bit of a foil to the narrator. He acts as the president of the college the narrator attends and also tries to appease the white community, similar to the narrator. He's also black, but feels none of the pride that the narrator does. He puts on a nice mask, but proves incredibly power hungry. At one point, he expels the narrator and gives him letters of recommendation to find a job, only, after not receiving any job offers, the narrator finds that the letters actually heavily spoke against him. Dr. Bledsoe mostly shows up people that should be working together again end up working against each other. He essentially sells out his entire race and culture to become the president of a college. That to me just seems both terrible and incredibly sad. Now, the narrator eventually works for this group called the Brotherhood. It's led by a white man named Brother Jack. The Brotherhood was founded to defend the rights of people facing oppression, so mostly minorities and women in the story. This group is supposed to be a joint effort between multiple races to improve the livelihoods of many people. Brother Jack appears like the kind and upstanding person you'd expect to see in the 21st century. But ha! I fooled you. He's white, and that inherently makes him racist. Jokes aside, he actually is very racist and looks down on other people. I mean, the guy's a redhead, so by definition, I think that means he has no soul. He also has a glass eye that falls out at one point, so that happens. I feel like Brother Jack shows just how terrible the time was for minorities. Here's someone who fights for your rights and acts like a good person, but even he hates you. It kind of screams that no one will fight for you, so you need to fight for yourself attitude some characters have. getting into the plot to prepare for some very dark stories. When he was young, the narrator looked up to his grandfather. His grandfather acted like a yes man to the white people, hoping to kill them with kindness or something similar. However, on his deathbed, the grandfather states that he was a traitor to his people, something that confuses and sticks with the narrator for a long time. As he got older, the narrator became a good speaker. He was even invited to give a speech on racial equality to many prominent men in the town. For a reward, he would get a scholarship to attend a good black college. Everything's looking good, right? When he arrives at the venue, though, the group blindfolds him and forces the narrator to fight against other black men in a battle royale. All the while, the prominent men in the town placed bets, yelled taunts, and screamed racial slurs at the fighters. The scene really hits me hard because while fighting, the narrator was just continuously thinking about his speech. And all I could think about was how these men don't care about the speech. The fight ends, and the black men are led to a rug with a bunch of gold coins on it. They're told to get as many coins as they can. However, when they touch the rug, they receive an electrical shock from it. So they go through incredible pains to get these coins while the white men laugh at them. Turns out the coins were fake as well. So with all that done, the narrator goes up to give his speech on racial equality. The white men just jeer and interrupt him the entire time. A couple years later, the narrator is found attending college. He is asked to drive a wealthy white man connected to the college around campus. The man talks about his daughter and shows an interest in Jim Trueblood, the man who impregnated his own daughter. So, kind of disturbing there. They head to a bar afterwards where a couple black veterans are drinking. Those guys get into a fight, and the white man gets hurt. One of the veterans then makes fun of the narrator for being blind about racial relations. The president of the college gets mad at the narrator for what happened and expels him from the school. Then he gives the narrator some letters of recommendation before he goes. Now that I think about it, that does seem like kind of an obvious trap. I mean, he just got expelled. So why would the president say anything good for him? Plus, the narrator really could have looked at what the letter said, but I digress. The narrator travels to Harlem looking for work, but does not find any. At one point, he tries to get a job. The person who reads the letter actually has the decency to tell the narrator what it says, how the president makes him look like a fool. This man helps the narrator get a low-paying job, which is significantly less than what he was hoping to get, but still, it's a job. He works for a black man whose job it is to make white paint. Yeah, and they're really proud about the white paint, too. Eventually, that man suspects the narrator of joining a union and physically fights him, knocking the narrator out. The narrator then awakens in a hospital with some memory loss and the inability to speak. At the hospital, the white doctors conduct some shock therapy on him. They basically just electrocuted him. He eventually leaves and finds this woman named Mary who takes him into her home. She lets him live in there, and she helps him grow in his identity and cultural heritage. At some point, a black couple gets evicted from their home, and the narrator gives a big speech about the eviction. Brother Jack happened to be listening and offers the narrator a job, which he accepts. He is forced, though, to take up a new name and life by the Brotherhood. He finds a lot of success giving speeches in the Brotherhood. Eventually, though, the narrator receives a note telling him to remember his place as a black man. Soon after, he is accused by another member of the Brotherhood of trying to use the Brotherhood for his own goals. He is then moved to a post to advocate for women's rights. A white woman then seduces him after he gives a speech, and she tries to have him play out her fantasies about black men. The narrator eventually returns to Harlem and finds out that many black men have left the Brotherhood. The narrator finds one person he knows selling dolls on the street. That man is then confronted by the police because he doesn't have a permit to sell stuff. So, the police kill him. The narrator holds a funeral for the man and speaks highly of him in a speech. Brother Jack gets mad at him for this, and his glass eye falls out as he yells at the narrator. Race relations get extremely bad, and a group tries to beat up the narrator. He also finds out that the Brotherhood has basically given up on black civil rights. The narrator then decides to undermine the group by pretending to agree with them, going back to that kill them with kindness thing. The narrator tries to seduce a woman so he can gain information on the Brotherhood, but she wants him to do very naughty things. Okay, this book has been really dark and realistic the whole time, but even I don't feel comfortable saying what the woman wanted him to do to her. Like, that whole scene was just messed up to me. Either way, the narrator, either way, she knew nothing anyway, and the narrator leaves. Turns out there's a riot in Harlem, and the narrator happens to be there. A group tries to kill the narrator, but he gets away. Then he runs into a couple police officers who also try to attack him. Well, basically, the idea with that is that he had a briefcase, and because of all the riots, they thought he was trying to steal stuff and had put it in his briefcase. They tried to get him to let them look in his briefcase, but I mean, at that point, he already had a friend who died from the police, so I can understand him not being very trusting, and so he doesn't give the briefcase to him, and they kind of attack him for it. The narrator manages to stay away from them, but he falls into a manhole. The police then make fun of him and close the narrator in the hole. The narrator then chooses to stay in the hole, but also decides to come out once he finishes telling the story. He treats the story essentially like a bit of catharsis for him. At first, he thought he would kind of use it to just ramp himself up, but by the end of it, he feels not as angry anymore and decides to leave the hole that he kind of dug himself into when I think about it, which is poetic. There are a few key thimbles, no. There are a few key symbols that I feel should be pointed out. Even though Reinhardt is an actual character, he doesn't pop up in the story and acts more like a symbol. When a narrator hid his identity, people actually thought he was Reinhardt. Reinhardt is apparently the kind of person that does a lot of things. He's like a reverend, a pimp, and some other stuff I don't remember off the top of my head. And he doesn't let anything weigh him down. He represents the kind of freedom that the narrator was searching for. The irony is that he can only feel that freedom when pretending to be someone else. The glass eye that Brother Jack has also serves as a bit of a symbol. He's blind both literally and figuratively, and he tries to hide that blindness behind a nice demeanor. I take it to show how blind he is when it comes to other people, mostly caring about himself. I mean, everyone has a picture of themselves in their head, but it's your eyes that actually allow you to see others and yourself. The Sambo dolls, which that man who was selling stuff and was killed, this is what he was basically selling. It shows the power stereotypes have control. Let me repeat that. The Sambo dolls show the power stereotypes have to control people. They're supposed to represent a lazy, obedient slave. Think back to when the narrator was fighting for that group of prominent white men. That's kind of what it's representing. Then they try to have some control over their lives, the dolls, but the white puppet master simply sits back and laughs, controlling everything from behind the scene.